Hello there, and welcome to episode 15 of my playthrough of Dr. Robotnik's Ring Races. After all of this time, I've finally made it to the halfway point of this game. The Egg Cup is the final set of races on this first tab of the Grand Prix, and one of the most important cups in the game. And with a new PC and a new controller to play it on, I was looking forward to getting back into things. But before I sat down and recorded this, I did what I said I would in the last episode, and grinded rings in the tutorial for a good half hour. And for my trouble, my reward was Male, a high-speed, medium-weight character from the 1991 Sega PC game Popful Mail. I have unsurprisingly not played it, so this wasn't the most exciting unlock of all time. You'll also recognise I'm now playing as Metal Knuckles again, because I learned in my time away that the handling problems I thought were related to his stats was actually my controller breaking. Thank you for your work, Carol, but playing as you incurred my only second place in a cup, so I'm switching back to my good old reliable robots. Hot Celta is a remake of Red Barad's area from SRV Ducat, albeit with a much nicer appearance. Unfortunately, while the level isn't as bad as its original incarnation, it still isn't great, with lots of awkward corners and obstacles. And even more unfortunately, this is only a taste of what's going to come up later on in the Egg Cup. I didn't notice during that results screen that the Egg Cup wasn't going to be following the usual Grand Prix structure, so I was thrown off guard when I spawned into what was obviously not going to be a race. There's a challenge to break every prison here as Knuckles, but without prior experience, I was nowhere near close to doing that as his metallic counterpart. Sky Sanctuary is the closest to a common, normal race as the Egg Cup ever gets. Red Celta covers the entire course of obstacles, and future tracks get weird. But the strangest thing about Sky Sanctuary are a few spinning platforms. As such, it was pretty much the only time in the entire cup I had any idea what was going on, which meant that I could keep up with the AI far better than in the other races. I recognise that I'd be taking part in a prison break round this time around, but that doesn't mean I can tell you anything about Death XI. I destroyed one prison, mistook a proximity mine for a landmine and therefore misjudged area of effect, and then ran out of time, so only saw about an eighth of the arena. Lost Colony was something else. This is the main reason that the Egg Cup is as important as it is, because it has a very important collectible hidden somewhere inside of it. The problem is that from the moment the opening wire threw me backwards for some reason, I spent the rest of the race desperately trying to catch up with the competition through the course's labyrinthine corridors and some of the strangest level segments ever put to a racing game. So I didn't have all that much time to look for it in the overwhelming darkness. I have had to use multiple restarts in courses far simpler than this, so a second attempt wasn't exactly heartbreaking, especially because I knew that an attempt on the sealed star was never going to happen at this point. And this time, I was able to claim that I was actually participating in the same race as everyone else, so I had the bandwidth to take things a little slower and suss out the strange twists and turns, and hopefully to find the ever so important item hidden somewhere around the track. The darkness was still ridiculous though, to the extent that the course is actually made brighter when the dimming effect of the string item comes into play. The egg cup has hardly been a breeze up to now, but Death Egg proves it has been holding back. There are so many things I could point to when describing why this is far and away the toughest track up to this point, but the first thing to point out is that this, quite lengthy race, has a whopping 12 laps. The platinum medal for this is nearly 5 minutes, and it took me damn near 10 minutes myself. It throws everything the game has at you, whether that be anti-grav sections, or giant lasers, or dangerous trick jumps, or badniks all over the track, or conveyor belts crisscrossing your path, or spikes, or electrify floors, all of which is happening over a death pit below the entire track. There is not a single wall at any point to save you, and a million ways to get screwed over even when ignoring your competitors. I pray for mercy on anyone made to replay this, let alone multiple times, and I hope the person who decided to make one of the challenges, complete Death Egg without hitting a single hazard, gets hit by a car. Preferably mine. please check the video description to find my email address, where I expect to receive apologies from anyone who has ever claimed that I have a skill issue, because I feel like getting an A rank and first place on Death Egg, as well as a B rank overall on the Egg Cup, is a sign that I must be doing something right. Unsurprisingly, I didn't get a crack at the Sealed Star, but that can wait for another day, on easier cups. I had to sit through a lengthy set of credits for the second time to find out what I had unlocked for my performance, but they were pretty meaty. The CD from Death Egg's Eye, the Goggled Cup, and Gear 3. That comes with a new higher difficulty in Grand Prix mode, Viscous, but seeing as I'm barely staying afloat as is, I don't think we'll see much of that in this playthrough. But I did make use of Gear 3, because who doesn't love going fast, in a few match races to finish up, because there were a few things I needed to collect. I had seen the spray can on Panic City while testing my new setup, so I got my first taste at this new higher speed, rounding a few corners to get to it, and unlocked Pigeon as a new colour scheme. The more important match race was a return to Lost Colony, to finally find the item I was looking for. As the credits were rolling, I looked up where it was, mostly to confirm my suspicions, and armed with invincibility and sneakers, I'd made my way to this room full of boxes. The item I had just collected was the Mystic Melody, the single most important follower in the game. If you played Ring Races yourself, you'll have no doubt seen the challenges which involve using this follower at various Emerald Altars, because it's a challenge format which is used again and again. Now that I have the Mystic Melody in my collection, I think now is the perfect time to do a few more challenges. That'll be in the next episode. But for now, I hope you enjoy the video. It's quite different to the style I've been using previously, but frankly, I'm trying to experiment with ways to speed up production of these playthroughs so that I can use my new PC on some more exciting things. The obvious thing would be to just do my commentary as I record, as most people do, to avoid needing to write scripts, but I want to practice doing that instead of starting to do it in the middle of a playthrough. Therefore, I'll be trying to get through Ring Races as fast as possible. For now though, ciao.